Right, so it takes a truly hardened sense of irony to disrupt, destroy, and take offline dozens of hospitals in Gaza, turn your own hospitals into de facto military bunkers, and then howl about victimhood when a single medical facility that you intentionally placed military facilities next to catches a blast wave from those military installations being targeted by an enemy you fired on first. That's exactly what Israel is doing, isn't it? Screaming foul over one of their medical facilities getting caught in collateral damage, placed so that it would catch such damage should military headquarters nearby be targeted, and notwithstanding their own long track record of doing everything they are accusing Iran of having done, first in Gaza and now in Iran as well, at the very same time the media headline, Israel's victimhood once more. Israel have no moral high ground when it comes to striking hospitals. That so much is being made out of a total fabrication, whilst dozens of facilities lie in ruins in Gaza, and no less than 3 hospitals have been targeted by Israel in Iran, getting no attention at all in the slavish mainstream media, exposes the hypocrisy of Israeli wailing, that they're weaponising it at the same time, and the real truth gets buried. Well, not on this channel, it doesn't. Right, so as the war between Israel and Iran continues to escalate, Israeli officials and mainstream media outlets have erupted in outrage over what they label a deliberate Iranian missile strike on Soroka Medical Center in Beersheba. The narrative, amplified with dramatic headlines, such as the BBC going with a story titled, "I was lying in my bed, then the ceiling fell in," captioned with a picture whose byline reads, "The Soroka Hospital in Beersheba was hit by an Iranian strike on Thursday, although Iran denies targeting it." Or Sky News going with, "Iran strikes Israeli hospital in direct hit." Direct hit in inverted commas, of course, because it was no such thing at all. Though even that small difference still makes it a more honest piece than the BBC still. Not that that's much of a high bar. Functionally, the BBC piece interviews several Israelis and takes what they have said completely uncritically. Emotionally misleading commentary casting Israel as a victim of an unconscionable attack on its medical infrastructure, as this is, whilst not actually reporting what actually happened at all. Yet beneath all the Israeli and mainstream noise and moral grandstanding, and it's impossible for those paying attention to such events to not notice the irony, that the very nation crying foul over damage to one hospital has waged a systematic war on hospitals across Gaza and now in Iran as well. But Iranian hospitals getting hit? By finding information on that behind the screaming wall of mainstream media stories dominating the internet lists or the mainstream news on the TV, saying, "Poor Israel, look what that nasty Iran just did to you." But the discrepancy between Israeli and mainstream Western media rhetoric and their actions is not just hypocritical, it's deeply dangerous, it's misleading, and it's manipulative. On June the 18th, Iran launched a barrage of missiles in response to Israel's repeated strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities and the assassination of key personnel, not to mention strikes on civilian infrastructure in Iran, which by this point included not 1, but 2 hospitals already. Amongst the reported damage that day, though, seized on opportunist ally was Soroka Medical Center in Beersheba. Media outlets swiftly claimed a direct Iranian strike on the hospital, using images of the hospital, which absolutely has sustained significant damage. But compared to other targets Iran definitely meant to hit, such as the Weizmann Institute of Science, for instance, and certainly compared to hospitals all across Gaza, still largely in one piece. If Israel can make the lie stick, though, well, there will be calls for Iran to be investigated for the war crime of striking a hospital, being demanded by Israel, despite all of the hospitals they've hit themselves. Their constant victim routine, combined with arrogant denials of ever doing anything wrong, aided and abetted and shielded by Western leaders and the media. And if you really want a great example today of just how bad UK media is in particular, today the Murdoch Times has published an article titled "Israel has done most of the job, now Trump can finish it," in a tub-thumping appeal for Trump to join Israel in fighting Iran. And it's been co-written by Yoav Gallant, the former Israeli defense minister with an ICC arrest warrant against him for war crimes, getting that arrest warrant at the same time Benjamin Netanyahu got his, after all. It is truly depraved. He wants arresting, not given a national platform to spout filth. But the truth of the matter is that the Soroka hospital was never an Iranian target, but missiles were aimed at 2 nearby military targets: the IDF C-41, Command Control Communications Computers and Intelligence Headquarters, and the Gav Yam Negev Advanced Technologies Park, the latter being a strategic dual-use site believed to host advanced military research and cybersecurity operations closely aligned with Israel's military-industrial complex. Proximity of these targets to the hospital meant the damage was a result of blast waves, not a direct hit on the hospital. That's why the building's still standing. That's why windows are blown in. That's why ceilings came down, but certainly not the whole building. Iranian military officials have been consistent in their messaging. Military targets are legitimate, and civilian infrastructure is not to be intentionally targeted. The notion that Iran deliberately aimed a missile at Soroka is inconsistent with both tactical objectives and the available physical evidence, particularly the pattern of damage at the site, not to mention the pattern of Iranian attacks seen now across the last week that Iran and Israel have been taking lumps out of each other. It is Israel's choice to have located military assets next to civilian infrastructure. They do it everywhere. Mossad HQ having been in the residential Gilat district of Tel Aviv as another for instance. Israel used their own people as human shields in effect. Their cities are designed that way. It is for that reason that damage was caused to this hospital. But instead of acknowledging this in the media, and where Israel has chosen to weaponize the incident as a propaganda tool, so that same media amplifies that instead, portraying Iran as a villain in a narrative riddled with contradictions and distortions. Indeed, if the media were more honest, they'd be talking up the far bigger issue of the hypocrisy on show. Here's another example of Israel using hospitals as cover and the people within as human shields. That is even more on the nose if you consider another facility in Israel, the Ichilov Hospital in Tel Aviv. You see, underneath the Ichilov Hospital, not behind it, not next to it, not nearby, but directly underneath it, there is an IDF military installation and bunker. A bunker so secure that Benjamin Netanyahu and his equally deranged Defense Minister Israel Katz have literally conducted war cabinet meetings from within it, from directly beneath a hospital. They themselves have therefore used a hospital as cover, the people within unwittingly in the line of fire to protect them, knowing as they do that nobody apart from them, it seems, is depraved enough to deliberately target hospitals, as would have to be done in order to hit that bunker. This revelation casts an even darker shadow over Israel's accusations against Iran when you also consider all of the previous attacks on Gaza's hospitals by Israel and how they were justified by them. If a hospital becomes a legitimate military target merely because it allegedly housed Hamas command centers, as Israel has often claimed, then by Israel's logic, their own logic, Ichilov is fair game too, is it not? But the truth of the matter is, Israel's narrative is utterly untenable. If Hamas is condemned for operating from within or near hospitals or in tunnels underneath, we know all the excuses by now, do we not? How then can Israeli leaders justify running their war cabinet operations from a location directly beneath a hospital in a major metropolitan area? Well, they simply can't, can they? But they will. But then who's also going to tell you about all of this? Because the main media aren't going to, are they? The outrage over Soroka is particularly grotesque when compared to Gaza especially, against Israel's long-standing and well-documented campaign against Gaza's healthcare system. Hospitals like Al-Shifa, like the Al-Ali Arab Hospital, the Indonesian Hospital, Al-Quds, Al-Amal, the Turkish-Palestinian Friendship Hospital, the Jordan Field Hospital, Al-Auda, Kamal Adwan, the Nasser Medical Complex. They've all been targeted under the pretext of Hamas activity. The list goes on and on and on. The result has been a decimated healthcare infrastructure with many facilities now completely non-functional, having been deliberately targeted, having been subject to Israeli war crimes. And yet all we ever hear still is Israel has a right to defend itself. Against who, though? Dialysis patients? Cancer patients? Survivors of previous strikes? How about babies in incubators? But they're all Hamas, I suppose. There are no innocents in Gaza, as we've often been told. How many times have we actually heard that one by now? The World Health Organization recently issued a dire set of warnings that the Nasser Medical Complex and Al-Amal Hospital are at imminent risk of becoming completely non-functional, potentially leading to a humanitarian collapse in southern Gaza with regards to healthcare. These are not the unfortunate accidents of war. These are part of a calculated effort by Israel to cripple Gaza's ability to survive, let alone resist. Moreover, Israel has been caught red-handed fabricating evidence to justify some of these strikes on hospitals too. A video they've just published, coming from Israeli sources as it has, claiming to show a Hamas tunnel beneath the European hospital, has been exposed to have been completely fabricated, totally made up. Israel making up doctored and misleading nonsense once again to try and justify striking a hospital deliberately. This is the pattern of deception that underscores the propagandistic nature of Israel's military justifications. It's their biggest weapon, after all, the Hasbara. It is their most dangerous, I would argue, as well, because it has fooled the world for years, for decades. Gaza has now opened eyes thanks to social media, and headlines and nonsense spreading such dishonesty presented as news risks us all being fooled again if we keep being hammered by enough of it. But surely that genie is out of the bottle now, right? Surely we're not going to let them put that back in. Surely we're not going to go back to being dumbed down and ignorant again as to what Israel's really like. Further examples are abundant if you think you could be, if you think it might happen, if you think some people might be fooled. The Al-Ali Arab Hospital was bombed early in the war. The Al-Shifa Hospital, Gaza's largest medical facility, was besieged and then raided, destroying much of its critical care capabilities. The Indonesian hospital in Beit Lahia was shelled repeatedly. The Al-Quds Hospital, funded by the Red Crescent, was rendered inoperable. The Kamal Adwan Hospital was reduced to rubble. Nasser Medical Complex is now the last major referral hospital in Gaza, and it teeters on the edge of total collapse. And after all of that, Israel paints itself as a victim over collateral damage to just one of its hospitals in Beersheba. And yet, for as much as we can focus on Gaza as the chief comparison to show Israeli hypocrisy when it comes to hospital strikes in its starkest terms, in its most horrific and large-scale terms, and bringing matters back to its attacks on Iranian civil infrastructure, that has also included hospitals. And yes, I mean hospitals plural. On the 14th of June, Israel struck the Hakim Children's Hospital in Iran, marking the first Israeli hospital strike on Iran in this conflict. It's a deliberate act of aggression that came just one day into this escalation between Iran and Israel. And Israel picked a kids' hospital. They did so for a drone strike. Days later, on the 16th of June, the Farabi Hospital in Kermanshah was hit in another Israeli strike. That killed 45 women and children and injured at least 75. And in the early hours of this morning, a third hospital was hit, this time in Tehran. The Iranian Health Ministry releasing preliminary statements, but limited information due to ongoing assessments at time of writing means I can't say a lot more about that one right now, except that a third hospital has been hit. While Israeli and Western media obsess over Soroka's broken windows, they remain disturbingly silent about these mass casualty strikes that represent clear violations of international law and basic human decency. And their hypocrisy is exposed when an Israeli hospital getting hit is headline news, full of half-truths and distortion as it is. But 3 Iranian hospitals being hit has gone largely ignored outside of foreign and independent media. Brown people, though, I suppose, isn't it? The Soroka incident has become a case study in media manipulation, and I would argue racism as well. A white person hospital is news, a brown people hospital isn't. Israel's claims that Iran deliberately targeted a hospital was uncritically repeated across major Western media platforms. Outlets have run Israeli government statements, notably the one from Israel Katz, calling for the assassination of Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei, suggesting he ordered the Soroka strike and can no longer be permitted to exist as a result of that. Which is, of course, just a baseless and inflammatory accusation, aiding Israel's war narrative, and too many media outlets just repeat it verbatim and unquestioningly. Meanwhile, journalists within Israel are being targeted for reporting truthfully. According to some reports, Israeli officials have cracked down on local reporting about the Iranian missile strikes, and the psychotic Itamar Ben-Gvir has gone so far as to call for the arrest of anyone caught reading or watching Al Jazeera. And they call themselves the only democracy in the Middle East, don't they? This climate of fear and repression illustrates how the Israeli government uses its media to manufacture consent and suppress dissent, painting a sanitized version of the war for both domestic and international consumption, and journalists, Zionist ones, pro-Israel ones, on all sides, lap it up. And often this is just run by other outlets virtually word for word. No actual investigation or journalism ever done at all. It's just stenography for a genocidal apartheid state. Israel's repeated justification for bombing hospitals in Gaza is that they are allegedly used by Hamas's command centers. Yet in Beersheba, Tel Aviv, and Gaza itself, Israel has placed critical military infrastructure itself directly beside or beneath hospitals. Israel accuses others of crimes it commits more blatantly itself. It uses its own hospitals for military advantage, accuses others of doing the same, and then demands global sympathy when a hospital is incidentally damaged due to its own strategic decisions. The Israeli blockade of Gaza continues to exacerbate an already catastrophic health crisis. Humanitarian agencies warn that the few remaining functional hospitals may soon shut down due to fuel shortages, lack of medical supplies, and repeated bombings. Hospitals like the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital and Al-Basma IVF Centre have been destroyed or rendered inoperable. There's no end to medical facilities I could care to name. Ambulances have been targeted. Doctors Without Borders convoys have been attacked. Patients fleeing under IDF evacuation orders being killed en route. Even makeshift field hospitals like the one at Khadija School in Deir al-Balah have been struck. The systematic targeting of healthcare infrastructure is not only deliberate, but it's designed to break the will and survival capacity of an entire population. It is genocide. Meanwhile, the mainstream media, many Western governments remain complicit in this silence, focus instead on a single Israeli hospital with damage, sure, but an overblown narrative to go with it. Israel's aggression towards Iran continues beyond hospitals. It has launched strikes on the Arak and Natanz nuclear facilities again in the last 24 hours, risking a regional catastrophe and nuclear fallout each time they do so. Iran's retaliation has so far focused on military targets only, acts of self-defense permitted under international law, even as Israel attempts to reframe the conflict as one of Iranian savagery against civilians by making so much of this incidental damage to a single hospital such a big story. With all the missiles getting through Israel's air defenses, if Iran were really inclined to target hospitals, and surely they'd have targeted more than one, surely Ichilov with that military bunker underneath it would have been a more primary target than Soroka. The outrage over Soroka Hospital is not just about justice, not morality or international law. It's a smokescreen, a calculated media event designed to obscure a far more grotesque reality. Israel has made the destruction of healthcare systems a deliberate component of its military strategy, from Gaza over the last 20 months to Iran here and now. The hypocrisy is undeniable. The propaganda is transparent. The media's role in this is blatant. And yet much of the world continues to look the other way, or worse, participate in this theatrical deceit. We've got to demand consistency. If the bombing of hospitals is a war crime, then it's a war crime, regardless of who commits it. By all means, investigate the Soroka event all the more. I suspect Iran would welcome that. But not if it is Israel doing the investigating and demanding their word be taken as gospel by everyone else, because their word is utterly worthless. If using hospitals as human shields is unacceptable, then it is unacceptable when Israel does it too. And if we are to have any credibility in advocating for peace, we must first insist on the truth. And if Israel is so sure of themselves, why do they always refuse independent investigation? They're so self-righteous, what do they have to hide? The answer is probably everything. Lies and media mistruths are not going to save Benjamin Netanyahu from ongoing Iranian retaliation. The desperation to drag Donald Trump in is getting ever more shrill, and to see just how frantic he's getting now, do check out this video recommendation here as your suggested next watch. Please do also hit like, share and subscribe if you haven't done so already, so as to ensure you don't miss out on all new daily content, as well as spreading the word and helping to support the channel at the very same time, which is very much appreciated. Holding power to account for ordinary working class people. I'll hopefully catch you on the next video. Cheers, folks.